The sun was setting over Eldorin village, bathing the sky in hues of orange and crimson. A warm breeze carried the scent of roasted maize and fresh palm wine from the bustling marketplace. Women sat outside their homes, chatting in cheerful voices, while children ran barefoot across the dusty paths, their laughter echoing through the air. But amid the village's lively atmosphere stood Eldorin Manor, an eerie mansion looming at the farthest edge of town. The villagers feared it, warning their children never to go near. It belonged to Lord Edric, the wealthiest and most powerful man in Eldorin. He had land, riches, and influence, yet, despite his wealth, his household was cursed. Edric had married 3 times, but none of his wives remained. His first wife, Leora, had mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind only her wedding gown. The second, Selene, was rumored to have run away, though no one had ever seen her leave. The third, Marries, had supposedly died in her sleep, but the villagers whispered that something more sinister had happened. People speculated, but no one dared to question Edric. His wealth shielded him, and those who spoke against him seemed to vanish into obscurity. Now, preparations were underway for his 4th wedding. His new bride, Alina, was a young woman known for her beauty and kindness. She was the daughter of a poor farmer, and when Edric chose her, her family rejoiced. They saw it as an opportunity and escape from poverty. But while her parents celebrated, Alina felt uneasy. Something about Edric's eyes sent chills down her spine. Something about the mansion seemed wrong. The wedding was grand, filled with music, dancers, and feasting. The entire village attended, admiring Alina in her fine silk dress and golden jewelry. Edric smiled with pride as he placed coral beads around her neck, but Alina could not shake the feeling of unease. That night, as she stepped into Eldorin Manor, a strange sensation crept over her as if she were walking into a trap. At first, her life in the mansion seemed luxurious. She had everything she could wish for: exquisite dresses, delicate perfumes, and endless feasts. Yet, at night, the house felt alive. She heard whispers in the corridors, soft voices calling her name. The mirrors reflected movements that weren't hers. The air was always cold, no matter how warm it was outside. The servants avoided her questions about the previous wives. If she mentioned their names, they lowered their heads and hurried away. Alina knew something was terribly wrong. One evening, when Edric left on business, she decided to explore the mansion. The hall stretched endlessly, filled with ancient portraits of Edric's ancestors. Their painted eyes followed her, watching her every move. At the end of a dimly lit corridor, she found a locked door. Something told her that the answers she sought were behind it. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Then, with a deep breath, she pushed the door open. And what she saw inside would change everything. The room was covered in dust and cobwebs, the scent of age thick in the air. Moonlight streamed through a cracked window, illuminating an eerie sight. 3 wedding gowns. They hung neatly on a rack, untouched by time, their delicate lace preserved as though waiting for their owners to return. Beneath them, scattered jewelry lay: abandoned bracelets, necklaces, golden rings encrusted with gems. Some were tangled together, as if snatched off in a hurry. Alina's breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled as she took a step forward, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might echo in the empty room. Then, in the corner, She noticed a large wooden chest. A terrible instinct told her not to open it, but curiosity overpowered fear. With shaking fingers, she lifted the heavy lid. Inside were bones, human bones. Alina clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. The truth was undeniable now. Edric hadn't lost his wives, they were murdered. The room felt colder, as though the spirits of the dead were still there, watching. Then she heard footsteps approaching. Alina. Edric's voice echoed through the hallway. Panic surged through her. She shut the chest and frantically looked for a place to hide. Spotting an old curtain, she pressed herself against the cold wall behind it, trying to slow her breathing. The door creaked open. Edric's tall figure loomed in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the room. His gaze swept over the wedding gowns and the chest. Then, a slow, knowing smile curled across his lips. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, my dear. Alina held her breath, frozen in place. Then she saw it, a rusty door on the far side of the room. The moment Edric turned his back, she bolted. Stop, he roared. She ran into the night, her bare feet hitting the cold ground. His furious shouts echoed behind her, but she didn't stop. She had only one place to go. She had to find Elia, the village healer. Alina ran through the village, her heart hammering in her chest. The shadows of the night stretched long and eerie, and every sound made her flinch. Behind her, she could still hear Edric's enraged shouts, but she didn't dare look back. She stumbled onto the worn path leading to the home of Elia, the village healer. The old woman had always been regarded as wise, feared by some but respected by all. If anyone could help her, it was Elia. Reaching the wooden door, Alina pounded on it frantically. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Elia's wrinkled face. Her sharp eyes studied Alina, taking in her tear-streaked face and trembling hands. He knows, Alina gasped, struggling to breathe. He knows I found them. Elia didn't need to ask what she meant. She had known the truth for years. She pulled Alina inside and shut the door. You must calm yourself, child, tell me everything. Between frantic breaths, Alina told her about the room, the wedding gowns, and the chest filled with bones. Elia listened in silence, her face grim. When Alina finished, the old woman nodded. You are not the first to seek the truth, she murmured. But you are the first to escape alive. Alina stared at her in shock. You knew. Elia sighed, moving toward a small wooden shelf filled with herbs, powders, and strange artifacts. She lit a candle, the small flame flickering against the darkness. I warned the village many years ago, she said. But no one listened. Edric's wealth blinds them. They fear him too much to ask questions. Alina clenched her fists. We have to do something. We can't let him continue this. Elia turned to her, eyes dark with a serious expression. There is a way, but it will not be easy. Alina leaned forward. Tell me. The healer gestured to the flickering flame. The spirits of his wives still linger. Their souls are restless, trapped by his dark magic. We must call upon them and break the curse that gives him power. Alina shuddered as she remembered the whispers in the mansion. But to do that, Elia continued, you must return to Eldorin Manor. The source of his power is there, a small black idol hidden in the basement. It must be destroyed. Alina's stomach turned at the thought of going back. But before she could respond, a loud crash shook the house. The door burst open. There stood Edric, his eyes glowing with fury and something inhuman. "You think you can stop me?" he growled. His voice was deeper than before, unnatural. In his hand, he held a gleaming machete. Elia stepped forward, unshaken. "Your reign ends tonight, Edric." A gust of wind rushed through the room, blowing out the candles. Then, the spirits came. The air turned frigid as the spirits materialized, their forms translucent and filled with sorrow. Alina recognized them from the portraits in the mansion Leora, Selene, and marries. Their voices filled the room, whispering together in an eerie harmony. "Justice. We seek justice." Edric stumbled back, swinging his machete wildly. But it passed through them, his once confident expression twisted into fear. "No, I made the sacrifice. I followed the ritual." Elia raised her hands, her voice firm and powerful. "Your time is over, Edric. The spirits have come to reclaim what you stole." The ghostly figures lunged, their wails rising into a deafening crescendo. Edric screamed as their spectral hands latched onto him, their energy draining his strength. His body convulsed, his skin growing pale. Alina didn't wait. She ran past the struggle and out into the night. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows dark and lifeless. She had to destroy the idol before it was too late. Racing through the doors, she sprinted down the long corridors, the walls seeming to close in around her. The basement door creaked as she pushed it open, descending the cold stone steps into the dark abyss below. And there it was, the small black idol, sitting on an altar, surrounded by dying candle flames. Its surface gleamed, its carved eyes seeming to watch her. A dark mist swirled around it, whispering in an ancient tongue. Alina grabbed a heavy stone from the ground. The mist hissed, sensing danger. Then, summoning all her strength, she smashed the idol. A horrific shriek erupted from the broken pieces as the shadowy entity inside it writhed and dissipated into nothingness. At that moment, the entire mansion began to shake. Alina barely made it out before the walls started collapsing behind her. Outside, she saw Edric's body lying lifeless on the ground. The spirits had drained him of his essence, leaving him an empty shell. The wind whispered one last time, and then the spirits faded into the night, finally free. By sunrise, the entire village had gathered around the ruins of Eldorin Manor, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. The once grand mansion, a symbol of wealth and mystery, was now nothing but a smouldering pile of rubble. Thick smoke curled into the sky, carrying away the last remnants of its dark past. Alina stood at a distance, her body still trembling from the night's events. Her clothes were torn, her hands scraped, but she was alive, she had survived. Beside her, Elia, the village healer, watched with solemn eyes. She had seen many things in her lifetime, but nothing as terrible as the truth Alina had uncovered. The villagers murmured among themselves, their voices heavy with guilt and unease. Many of them had suspected Edric's darkness, but had chosen silence over action. Now, faced with undeniable evidence, they could no longer look away. A young woman, Myra, stepped forward hesitantly. "Is it true?" she asked in a whisper. "Edric, he killed them." Alina nodded, her throat tight. "Yes, his wives never left him. He sacrificed them to a dark force that granted him wealth and power." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some women clutched their chests, horrified. The men exchanged uneasy glances. Edric had been one of them, a man they had respected and feared. But now, he was nothing more than a monster, whose reign had come to a terrible end. Alina cleared her throat, stepping forward to address the villagers. 4 years, you ignored the whispers, turned away from the warnings. Your fear gave him power. But Alina, she did what none of you dared to do. She listened, she acted. And now, because of her, the spirits of his victims are finally free. A heavy silence followed her words. The villagers lowered their heads, ashamed. Alina exhaled, her heart still heavy. She had done what was necessary, but the weight of it pressed upon her shoulders. She had fought against something far greater than herself. And though she had won, she would never be the same again. Will it come back? A voice called from the crowd. Alina turned to the ruins, the broken stones and charred wood. The idol was destroyed, the curse was lifted, and Edric was gone. Whatever dark force had lived within that house had been severed from the world. No, Alina answered firmly. The evil that fed on this place is gone forever. Relief washed over the villagers, but Alina knew that some wounds would take longer to heal. She had survived the horrors of Eldorin Manor, but the memories of whispering spirits, hidden bones, and Edric's glowing eyes would never leave her. She would carry those memories for the rest of her life. But she was no longer the frightened girl trapped in a nightmare. She was the girl who fought the darkness and won. And as the first light of dawn touched the village, Alina stepped into a future she had reclaimed for herself. The nightmare was over.